Good afternoon, Cornerstone. It's good to be back from vacation. Vacations are good breeding grounds for ideas, and I'm going to work on one here for the next week or two, see how it goes. This idea is to bring you along step by step in my exegesis for Sunday's sermon. I bring you along each step of the way on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesday, going through the structure of the text. Wednesday, going through the historical, cultural discoveries, maybe some cross-referencing and definitions. And then Thursday, the voices of other theologians on our text. Today, we're in Matthew chapter 15, verses 29 through 39, which is the feeding of the 4,000. A bit confusing in the sense that we just had a few chapters earlier, the feeding of the 5,000, and the details seem to be the same in both of them, including the disciples' apparent stupor as to what they're going to do. And we would wonder, well, why the stupor and why the question and why these two miracles? And some would say, oh, it's the same miracle, written twice, it's a mistake in the Bible. And we don't go there, but we also want to discuss why we don't go there. So with that, let's go to the text. Let's look at the structure today and be very glad it's early in the week. It's Tuesday and not Friday, as we are trying to study and understand this. Okay, now looking here at the text, what I do is I put my verb phrases in green, and I put anything that modifies the verb in pink. That might be participles or infinitives. And then I'll highlight certain phrases that I really want to pay attention to, or I will put certain nouns or noun phrases in blue that I think are important. So looking at this, Jesus went on from there, and he was up on the coast of the Mediterranean, and he walked beside the Sea of Galilee. So he's changed venues, and he went up on the mountain and sat down there. And when Jesus sits down, teachers sat down in the synagogues, the students stood and listened. I wonder if there's some of that in that verb. Great crowds came to him, and what were they coming to him for? Bringing their lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet. That's an active verb. When you take your sick and you put them at the feet of Jesus, I think you're committing their fate to Jesus. It's a statement of faith that Jesus is, with the Pharisees doing their thing against Jesus, these people are putting the sick at Jesus' feet. They're trusting Jesus. I think it's an act of faith. It says he healed them, so that the crowds wonder when they saw. And what did they see? The mute speaking, all of these participles, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. Now that phrase, you'll see I have God of Israel in blue there, because that could be a key insight as to why we have the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000 immediately after it, that this is a different crowd. This is, in fact, Gentiles. They're not glorifying their God as Israelites. They're glorifying the God of other people, the God of the Israelites. That's making these Gentiles, at least that's my understanding. And having appeared after the Canaanite woman in Tyre and Sidon, declaring that she is a dog receiving crumbs from the master's table while the children, the Jews, are eating at the table. I think this is a very Gentile passage. Anyway, continuing with the structure, we see then in verse 32, Jesus called his disciples to him. I have compassion on them. I am unwilling to send them. The disciples are again asking, where are we going to get bread to feed in such a desolate place, this great crowd? And Jesus said, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7 and a few small fish. And directing the crowd to sit down, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 7 baskets full, a different number than the earlier miracle, 7 baskets full of broken pieces left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. So I'll show you my outline for Sunday as it's starting to develop. This will change greatly. But we see point 1 will be that tracking Jesus, leaving the Canaanite woman in the region of Tyre and Sidon. He travels to Galilee and sits on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Great crowds came and committed all manner of sick and disabled persons to him. Jesus healed their sick, and the people glorified the God of Israel, cueing us in on who these people are. And then I just have this transition thought. We know that the disciples were slow of understanding when Jesus fed the 5,000, hence the miracle walking on water. And Mark will connect those two miracles, saying that they did not understand the feeding of the 5,000. The reason for their lackluster response here might be the crowds were Gentiles. And perhaps these disciples were still processing the woman up in Tyre and Sidon, the Gentile who called herself a dog under the table. And so perhaps they're still processing all of this. So in point number 2, we'll explore that. Jesus had compassion. He calls his disciples, declares his unwillingness to send them away. The disciples acknowledge the problem of the remoteness. And Jesus, again, just like at the feeding of the 5,000, asks them what they have on hand. And I'm going to look at a cross-reference or two here, and we'll look at those tomorrow. But Jesus repeats the miracle of the feeding of thousands from a few fishes and loaves. And so we're going to dial in on the purpose of this passage, why it's in Matthew's gospel. But that's where we're at for now, noting that we have a similar but different episode to the miracle a few chapters earlier, the feeding of the 5,000. So thank you for listening, and feel free to comment below. I will read every comment. It may affect the content of the sermon on Sunday, may help guide me in my studies this week, and we'll see how this goes. Thank you.